Why is natural family planning something that the church accepts? The next one is similar. A person's asking, are contraception and same-sex sexual relationships wrong for the same reason, that they're taking the fruitfulness from the sexual act? So these are two big questions. But I guess
Right.
to tackle the first one, why is natural family planning something that the church even accepts?
Yeah. Well, I think they're both really good questions, and I think that the beginning of that would be, um, so what is well, we could basically ask the question, what is sex for? Like, what's the very nature of sex? And we'd be able to say, okay, so we know what a thing is based off of what it is for. So we know the what it isness when we know the what it is forness. And so we know that a chair is for. We know a thing is a chair if we know what it's for. This is for sitting on. Oh, it's a chair. That's the chair nature of chair. This is a thing to place things on. That's what it's for. Okay, that's the nature of tableness or platformness or whatever, something like this. So the nature of sex we know by what is it for in the first place? And we can just by analyzing this and breaking it down in the most raw sense, it is for the promulgation of the species, right? It's for procreation. And we also know that one of the things that it naturally does, biologically even, is it binds or unites the two people engaged in this behavior. And so, okay, we recognize the fact the classical, or not classical, but the rhyming or alliterative way to say this is babies and bonding. So we know that the what it is forness, and that's what we know what it is. And so what we recognize is if I go against either of those things, if I actively work against, and this is for Raul, like the key distinction, if I actively work against any of these things, if I work against bonding, that would be I am artificially inseminating someone against their will. There's not a bonding kind of situation, or even we're simply using each other for the purposes of procreation. We recognize, okay, there's something that's violating the very nature of that thing. And the converse is true, whereas if one were to engage in the sexual act simply for the binding part, but not for oriented towards babies, and I was actively working against that, then we'd recognize that, okay, so I'm violating in some way the very what it is forness of the nature of sex. Natural family planning doesn't actively work against the nature of sex or work against how sex works. It works with how sex works. For example, if you were to look back at I use this example sometimes, and I think the analogy bears out the nature of eating. Okay, so what it is for? Well, what it is for nourishment. That's what it does. It also, as a as a intrinsic second effect, if you want to say, is pleasurable. Typically, eating is not only nourishing, it is pleasurable. And so sometimes we all know people who will eat for pleasure, but they're not violating they're not violating nourishment. They're just, I'll have that extra piece of cake because it tastes really good, but not violating nourishment. Or I'm eating that power bar because I need some nourishment, but it doesn't taste great. I'm not eating it for the flavor, but I'm not violating the nature, the end of flavor. Now, on the other hand, if someone were to say, I'm eating this food and then I'm going to actually actively work against nourishment. So I know so many people who struggle with this when it comes to I'm eating and then I'm going to make myself throw up. They'd be actively working against the very nature of eating. And it's so interesting because if we meet people like this, and I imagine people who are watching this and part of this conversation right now, that you realize this is part of your experience, and you know this, in your heart, I'm not proud of that. And again, it's just, this is one of those situations where you ought not to be ashamed of this, but it's one of those things where you're like, this is a wound that's in me. And every time I do it, it hurts me a little bit more. And someone say, no, it's just eating. It's no big deal. It's just eating. It's just throwing up. It's no big deal. But you know that your experience is I'm deeper and deeper into this. So because why? Because for you and I, eating is a human act. For animals, it's an animal act. It doesn't reach their soul. But for us, this is everything we do as human beings is a human act. Therefore, to work against this intensely human act is to hurt ourselves. Now, if there's something even somewhat more powerful or more core to who we are than eating, is the sexual act. To actively work against bonding or to actively work against babies, procreation, it does something against our very hearts. Now, what an NFP does, or natural family planning would do, is it would be more along the lines of saying, okay, I'm not violating procreation at all. I am simply, here's this Jack and Jane, and they are married, and they're entering into the sexual embrace when Jane is not fertile, for the sake of the unitive or the bonding element, but they're not thereby violating the baby or the procreative element of sexuality. Much like, okay, I'm eating this power bar because it's giving me nourishment, not because it tastes good, or I'm eating this cake just because it tastes good, not because it gives me nourishment. In those cases, I'm not violating the nature of food, and in NFP, I'm not violating the nature of sex. If that makes any, Jason, do you think that it makes sense, or is that
that makes a lot of sense? Because I think behind Raul's question a lot of times is sometimes an assumption that the Catholic Church is completely against controlling births. Because you hear birth control, therefore controlling of any births is immoral. But natural family planning, because it is so effective, it's like more than 99% effective, could be abused. It could be used in a contraceptive manner, because in order for an act to be morally good, you need both the motive and the means to be good. And so with NFP, the means is good. It's a properly ordered way to plan your family, but the motive could be evil. Of just like, look, we don't want any more kids because I hate diapers, and I want a 5-car garage, and I want a new set of jet skis. So forget human life. It's a materialistic motive. And so even if your means is just, the immorality of the motive would make the act unjust. You could have a couple contracepting where their motive is good. Well, the doctor told us one more pregnancy and my wife could die, so we're going to use, contraception, or we're going to sterilization or abortion. Well, you might have a moral motive, but you're using an immoral means. And so with natural family planning, for it to be used in a good way, you need both a serious reason to postpone the next pregnancy and then the use of natural family planning together. And so the church will never tell you how many kids to have. Like, you need to have this many, but God will. If you listen to him in prayer, and with natural family planning, it invites you to open your heart to him in that way. And couples who use it have a divorce rate under 4%. I mean, church is onto something here. I mean, yeah, it's difficult, but chastity is a virtue we got to practice in marriage and well. Because, God's plan for human intimacy is not that you can only become one flesh with your wife on the times that she's fertile, because any other time it's immoral. Well, no, because she's only fertile like a week of the month. And then after menopause, not at all. And if that was God's plan, then the vast majority of marriages would be spent in continence and abstinence. But it's not his plan, because he's created the babies and the bonding to go together, and we're not the ones that should separate it. But God's the one who can create seasons of infertility and fertility. So great question, great answer, Father. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that little clip, but if you want to see the whole episode where this came from, just click the link here. And in the meantime, we want to invite you to help us share this message, and there's a couple things you can do real quick. Number one, if you like or comment or share this video, YouTube will actually show it to more people. Also, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell. We release videos every single day, and you'll be notified as soon as those come out. If you want to help us also to spread this message, you can support us at patreon.com/Jason Evert. That helps us to create these videos and show them to the whole world. God bless.